Hey, what is up? My name is Chris and welcome to Coding in Public. Today I'm going to show you how to do these little pull quotes here where you can actually have dynamically generated pull quotes with an author's name, and all you have to do is click here and it'll actually create a tweet for you with the text itself, then with the actual link written by whoever it's by. All right, so that's what we're going to do today. Well, of course, there's other ways to do this with like a static site generator. There's other templating options. JavaScript is an option and it's pretty easy to get going. All right, let's go ahead and jump in and let me show you how it works. Because the first thing we're going to do is actually just come into here, and this is just a blog layout I did a few videos back. So if you want to see how to do this, I will make sure to add a card at the end of the video. But for now, I'm just using this as an example of like a blog post. So let's say you come in here and you had a paragraph, and all we're going to do is add a class here of callout like that. And I'm going to expand this out, and we'll say like, this is a pull quote that I want to feature in a tweet right about now. All right, something like that. So we'll go ahead and save that. And if you come over here, it just looks like normal text because that's what it is. We don't have anything set up for this class of callout. What I'm going to do next is come to the bottom here. Let's do just above the closing body tag. I'm going to do script src like that. And then in here, let's call this, let's call it callout.js. And then what I'm going to do is say type of module, and that way all of our variables that are global in this file will be scoped just to this module. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we need to actually create that file. So let's do that now. So I'll come over here, new file, callout.js. And just to make sure it works, this is always a good idea because it's super easy to just forget this. And something's messed up and you're doing all this work and frustrated when if you just do something like this and make sure it's actually connected. All right, so we've got that. Now what we're going to do is actually see if we can grab that callout quote. So what I'm going to do is just console.log, and we're going to console.log, let's see, document.querySelector, and we're going to do the callout like that. If I refresh there, you see I've got callout, and it is actually finding it. Now what I want to do is actually do query selector all, because I don't know how many there might be. And in this case, it's going to give me a node list with just one item because that's all I've got. But I might have multiple callouts, and I want to make sure I can do these pull quotes on any of these callouts. So the way we're going to set this up then is just any text you want called out, you just add that class of callout. And as long as you have the script on the page, it's going to do all the work itself. All right, so that's all you got to do. Now, everything else is going to be JavaScript today. Now let's go ahead and add this to a variable, and this will just be a global variable. Let's call it callouts is equal to document.querySelector all callout. All right, now if there's no classes of callouts, it's going to give us an empty node list. So what we can do then is say if callouts.length is equal to, is not equal to 0. So if there's anything in it at all, then we want to say callouts.for each. We'll just say for each. Let's just call it quote, just to keep it separate from the callout phrasing. And we'll say for each quote, we want quote.inner HTML is going to now be equal to, we'll say generate callout, and we'll pass in the quote. All right, now we haven't written that function yet, so let's go ahead and add something up top here just so it doesn't yell at us. So we'll say function generate callout, and we'll say callout is what it's been passed. And we'll come in here and say console.log callout. Okay, so if I save it here, it should actually pass along this one thing right here. Now, right now it's saying undefined, and that's because we're saying we want it to be set to whatever this returns, which right now is nothing. So that's not going to help us. Now, what we could do is actually say return callout like this, and then it'll actually put the actual HTML object in there. That's also not what we want to do, but just to show you that's what it's doing. Okay, so now that we've got that set, we're actually running it each of the callouts through this little function we're writing. What do we want this function to do? Well, we do want it to actually return, but we just want it to return a string. And if I do backticks here, we can add a bunch of templating and all this kind of stuff inside of here without any problem. So what I'm going to do is take whatever that paragraph is, and I'm going to add inside of that a couple different divs. So we're going to have a div here, div with a class of callout icon container like this. And then we'll add some stuff in there in a second. And then we're also going to have a div with a class of callout content like that. Okay, so we've got two items that we're going to return inside of that. Now, every time I get a call out, I get access to everything inside of this, as you can see, just like this. So right now I'm getting undefined, but I'm getting text content. I can get the class. I can get anything else connected to this HTML element. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually grab the text itself, and I'm going to put it inside a paragraph here with a class of callout content, and we'll just call it text like that. And then again, using template strings here, I can just say callout dot, and remember we're getting past the entire paragraph node, and so I just want the text, or let's see, the inner text, I think, inner text like that. And if I do that, you see now that text comes back. But if I inspect this, you see it's actually inside this inner div inside this paragraph with the class of callout content text. Now you may have noticed back over here that I actually have an author, and I can show you how I do that. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do that, but so that you don't have to pass in a bunch of stuff, probably the easiest thing to do is just going to be come up to our pull quote here and add a data attribute. So we're going to say data-author. And here we're going to set this to, I'll just set it to my name, Chris Pennington. All right, so now we've got access to that as well because again, we've got the whole text node itself. So I'm going to come down here and instead of text, we're going to say author. And to access a data attribute, I can just say callout, which is the thing that was passed in that paragraph node, .dataset.author, which is the name of the data dash whatever. So data dash author. And just like that, it should actually give me access to Chris Pennington right there. All right. And so what I'm going to do though is in case I forget to pass that in, maybe what we can do is say it either needs to be equal to that, or we could say it needs to be equal to, in backticks here, anonymous. That means if I were to come over here and I don't have a data attribute on it, like this should actually just read anonymous, like that. All right, or I could actually set it to nothing if we want to do that, and maybe that's a better idea. So that either way, basically I either have an author or I've got nothing. So let's change this back, add my name back in there just so we can use that now. If we jump back over to the live example, the other thing we need is we need this little thing. We're going to actually do that with the before pseudo element. So we're not going to need to add that into the HTML, but we do need these 3 icons. So let's jump back over here, and that's inside this icon container. So what we're going to have is we're going to have several link tags here with a class of callout icon, and then whatever the icon is. So in this case, we'll start with Twitter, and then inside that is where we're going to have the actual text itself. So just like that. So we're going to have the icon itself, inside here. Now I'm going to come over to simple icons, which is this free SVG icons for brands, and I'll say Twitter, and let's see if we can pull this up. So what I can do is download this SVG, and then I'm going to just open it over here in my code editor, copy that out, and then I'm just going to paste the SVG directly in here. Now I need to do a few things. Number one, I need a width on here. We're going to do just a width of 24 pixels. And then the other thing is this path itself. I want to set the fill to equal current color. And I'll show you why we're going to do that in a second. By default, it's just going to be black, but we want to actually style it according to the rest of our page. So now what I'm going to do is copy the SVG for Facebook and then copy the SVG for WhatsApp. I'll be right back with you. All right, that's what I've just done here. You'll notice here I've changed the class, the extra class in here to Facebook and then to WhatsApp. And again, I've added a width of 24 on both of these. And for both of these, I have the fill set to current color as well. So other than that, everything else is just the same as whatever I downloaded from here. So if I jump back over to the layout and I refresh, I should actually have those 3 icons now sitting there. But what I want to do is hook up each of these A tags to actually be like tweeting whatever this quote is. So I've actually got a little link here showing you how to do this. You can also just go search on Google. Marco Denick is awesome on Twitter. He has a bunch of great stuff. You should definitely go follow him. He tweeted this the other day. You can also just Google all this stuff too, but it's nice to have it here. So basically what you do is you just have a href like this, and it will actually open Twitter for the person like I showed you a second ago. So what we're going to do is copy this over here, and we're going to say inside here, let's see, href, and then we're going to set this to what he just gave us. All right. Now, what is it here that we want to add? So it's not going to be your text, obviously. What we're going to want, I'm going to add actually smart quotes here, and then inside of here, I'm going to do a template string. Again, because everything is in backticks, we can do that. And we've got the callout itself dot inner text. Again, this is just the text that was passed, and it's actually the same text that we're showing in the UI down here. So I want that to actually be part of the tweet content. Now for the URL, what I want to do is actually get the URL of the entire window. Now, because this is going to go for each individual callout, there's no reason to get this every single time. Let's just go up top here and globally have a variable called, let's call it URL like that. And we're going to set it to a window.location.href. And if you just console log window, this is one of those properties that lives on it. So what I can do then is come down here. And again, in template strings, I can add inside here URL like this. And because it's globally available to me inside this function, it'll just pull it. And every pull quote should have the exact same URL. Now I can add additional items here as well. So I've got the URL and the text. That's kind of the things required to actually tweet this, but I can also add additional things inside of this quotation mark. So I can come in here and let's add a non-breaking character. So if you do NBSP and a semicolon like that, that's basically a space that's non-breaking. It doesn't break the line. And so I can say, let's give me a space between the URL and the text that I'm tweeting, and then we'll say bye, and then we'll do another one of those. And now we want the author himself, so, or herself, whoever it is. I can come down here and let's grab the exact same thing. And so let's do that. And so perhaps to make this even more versatile, let's actually copy all this out and we'll say let's add in here by like that. So either by that or nothing at all. All right. So we'll actually put the by inside of here. That way, if there's no author that we're attaching to it from the data set, it'll just tweet the quote and the URL. And then just a few quality of life improvements here. Let's go ahead and say target equals _ blank. So it'll open in a new tab. And then let's also add an ARIA label that it says share to Twitter. All right. So if somebody is using a screen reader or something like that, they'll understand what this link does. All right. So before we do anything else, let's save this and jump back over to the layout and see if this actually works. Let's pull this in. Let's see. Are we getting an error? Yes, we are. All right, so it's yelling at us up here. I think maybe you can't do this template string quite like that. So yeah, that's not going to work. So we'd have to put by outside here like this, and then it'll either say by nothing or by them. So let's just take it out altogether, and we'll just have the author's name. Now, if I click this, it should actually open this up in Twitter, and you see it pulls the pull quote itself. You have the link, and then you just have the author like that. All right, cool. So we've got that basically set. So let's move on to the next one. Let me come in here. We're going to grab the next one. You can see there's a bunch of things you can do, like share to email or LinkedIn or Reddit or whatever. But let's go ahead and grab the Facebook one here. Not that you should be sharing anything to Facebook, but just in case somebody wants to. All right, so if I come in here and I paste this here, URL. So again, this would be the same thing. We're going to come in here. We're going to grab our URL from up top. And we can actually grab something that Marco doesn't mention here, which is we can come in here and just say and quote equals. And again, let's put some smart quotes inside here. And what I'm going to do is say the same thing, call out .inner text like that. And then once again, we can add additional things. So let's take the author again, and we'll just paste this right in here. So it should share that author's name as well. I'll also make this open in a new tab. And let me come down here. Let's see. Outside the actual href, I'll say target blank and then share to Facebook. Okay, so that one should be set now. I will warn you, because we are using a local server, if you try to use this button right now, it won't work, but it should work once it's actually up on the web with a real live web link. It has some kind of check it does on Facebook's thing, but it doesn't work. Twitter doesn't have something like that, so I could show you Twitter. All right, we are almost done with the HTML, and then we'll just work on the CSS. So I'm going to come down here and grab this same thing. And for WhatsApp, I'll say href, href equals, and the same thing. So the text itself, same thing we were looking at earlier, call out .inner text. And it doesn't have any kind of URL scheme for sharing the actual URL, but I can just add it as text. So I'll do that. I'll say and NBSP for that non-breaking space. And then in here, I'll share the URL. So that'll come through as well. I could do the author as well, but that you kind of get the point. All right. So I'm going to come in here and after the href, share to WhatsApp. Let's see, WhatsApp like that. Okay, so if I come back over this way, if we did everything right, these should all link, and you see it actually shows you that link. This is the pull quote, and it's actually doing that live for us. And now all these pull quotes are going to use the same classes and all this kind of stuff. And so what we want to do is just for each of them, we're going to actually have to generate all of this. But as long as there's any pull quotes at all, we also want to insert a style tag with all the styling we need for any pull quotes on the page. So let's go ahead and come back down here to our if statement and just say if there's any on the page, then we want to say document, let's do query selector, document.query selector, and we're going to select the body itself. And then we're going to insert some adjacent HTML. So the way you use this is you say either before begin, before end, or after end. If you want to know more about that, check out the MDM docs. But we're just going to say we want it to be, let's do after the end of the body tag. That's fine. It doesn't really matter, just somewhere. We could do before end if you want, but you give it one parameter like that, and then you actually just send it whatever text you want or thing you want to insert afterwards. So what we're going to do is actually add some backticks here, and I'll space out down this way. And we're going to just add some style tags. Well, one style tag like this. So this will only appear once on the page, and then each of these sections will be replaced by this text itself. So what do we want to do here? Well, we want to first of all grab our callout itself, and we're going to just say we want that entire thing to be a display of grid. If I say that nothing much will change, it'll actually change a little bit about how it spaces out, but we're going to start with a mobile first version. So let's go ahead and collapse this down so we can see what that looks like. So this is the pull quote itself right now. We're going to say we want this to be grid template columns. We're going to set it to auto in one fraction like that. So that means this section over here should be its own section, and then all of this should be its own section. In fact, if I come over here, you should see that. See callout icon container and callout content like that. Now, of course, you have to spell things correctly. Columns like that, and then they should stack next to each other. Let's go ahead and add a gap of 1 rem between those and say align items center. This will put both of those items in the center of their grid area. And then I'll say margin 1 rem and auto to give it space up and down. And with collapsing margins, now that gives me consistent margins up and down, even if I've got different margins from each side there. Next, let's go ahead and grab the callout content. That's the actual text itself, and let's get some styling going on that. Let's start by adding some padding around that whole area. So I'll say 1 rem and 2 rem like that. So side to side, it's got 2 rem, and up and down, it's got 1 rem. In fact, maybe let's do this. Let's do 2 rem just on the left. So 1 rem, and 2 rem like that. And that way the right extends as far as it can. And then we do want to add a border. So a border left, and I'm going to do 5 pixels solid, and I'm going to use an HSL value. I prefer to use those when I can, and this will just be set to, let's set it to 36, 100%, and 4%, which is the same text color as the text itself. Next, I'm going to say I want the font style to be italic, and then I'm going to change the font size to 1.3 rem to make it just a little bit larger than the rest of the thing to make it really clear that it's a pull quote. Now I'm going to grab the callout content text like that, and then also the callout content author, which are the 2 paragraphs inside of that div that we just set up. I'm going to set both of these to a margin of 0. By default, all the paragraphs in this article have a bottom margin. That's just the way I set up the project. That also, though, smashes these too closely together, but at least the spacing is more consistent. So let's go ahead and come in here and say display grid, and then we'll add back in. We'll do a gap of like, I don't know, 15 pixels, something like that. That will just space those 2 items out, but it won't add any bottom margin here or bottom margin here. It's just getting a gap in between those 2. Now, speaking of that callout content author, let's go ahead and add some special stuff for the author itself. Let me give myself a little bit more space so you can see what's going on. We're going to say font size needs to be 0.9 rem. We're going to make it a little bit tinier, basically, than a normal size. And we'll say font style is equal to normal instead of that italic. And then font weight, we'll just say bold. And then text transform, we want to be uppercase, right? And that should actually set it up like that. Now, what I could do is actually do a before pseudo element here and have like a little dash out, but I think I'm just fine with it like that. And maybe let's do something. So let me come in here and let's add that before pseudo element. So I'm going to say before, and then we'll just say, let's see, content equals, and then why don't I say by with a space like that, and then it will have by Chris Pennington. All right. We could also do a dash like that, an M dash, maybe with a space. I don't know which you like better. Let's do by. All right. There we go. So I think we've got everything done for mobile there. Let's move over to the icons. So we've got callout icon container. I think that's what it is. And let's say we want this to be a display of flex. And then we'll set the flex direction by default to column, and that will stack them up and down. And then we'll do a gap of 0.5 rem. That will space them out. So if I do that, now they stack up just like that, which is what I want. Next, let's actually grab the callout icons themselves. And let me just copy this out for the sake of speed. And what I want to do here is a few things. First of all, I want to say display of grid. Now you might be, why am I displaying grid these individual items? If I come in here and look, you'll see that without that, let me remove that first. Without that, they're not always in the very center of their area. So you see they're actually up top. And so I want to find a way to center the SVG inside of that callout icon class. And the easiest, quickest way to do that is with grid. So I say display grid and then place items center. If you don't know how to use grid, I have a recent series I did, and I'll try to remember to add a card for that. All right, let's add some padding around those. This will allow it, especially on mobile, to have kind of a touch target that's big enough. And then let's go ahead and grab the same color here, this HSL. We're going to set the color of the icons themselves to that same color. Now watch, when I save this, they should all change. And they change because I added current color to the SVG. Now, all of these don't have lines or strokes, they actually have fills. And so I did fill current color, you might remember. And current color just automatically grabs whatever color the parent has and applies it to that SVG fill or stroke, whatever you add it to. I think that's a really nice way of working with SVGs, and one of the reasons I really prefer SVGs, aside from their size and all that. And we're going to actually change the color in each of these depending on which item we're looking at, but they're all going to have the same transition. So let's add transition here. We'll do color 250 milliseconds. We'll do ease in and out. And then we'll do it for our transform, because we're going to actually scale it up some too. 250 milliseconds, we'll just do ease. And we might change that around some, but that's kind of the base. All right, so let's now come to grab our callout icon. I see that anytime we're hovering or we're focusing, this is just an is selector. What we're going to do is change this to say transform, scale, and we'll change it to 1.1. All right, so now if I come in here, let's get rid of this so I can actually hover. It should actually scale up like that. And you can come in here if you want to, and let me give myself a little bit more space so I can see what's going on down here. Let's see this SVG itself. Let's see, the callout is what I'm looking for. And I can actually click on this little thing in Chrome and actually change this and see it dynamically in real time. So if I want to change the behavior of that, maybe I want it to pop up a little bit more. Let's see what this would look like. Maybe I want it like that. That looks a little too extreme. The point is, you can just create your own cubic bezier here, then copy this out, and we can just change this for perhaps the transform. That might make it look a little bit more dynamic. So let's see. Yeah, so they kind of pop up. So maybe you like that. All right, now let's come down here, and we don't want to just worry about the kind of global settings for all of them. Now what we want to do is say, let's look at each of them. So for Twitter, we want on its hover and its focus to change its color to something else. So we'll say color. And again, if I come back over to simple icons here, and maybe let's start with the WhatsApp, I can actually just copy the hex code for their brand color. So let's do that. I'll copy this down 2 more times, and let's grab WhatsApp. Remember, that was a class I added to that, and I'll add the color there. And we'll do Facebook and grab the color here, Facebook. And then finally, Twitter. Grab the color here and add it over this way. So if I save it and I come over here and I hover, they should all change to their specific color. And again, because we added current color to those SVGs, now the color is applied when I change the color of the parent. All right, so I think that looks pretty good for mobile, but now that we're on desktop, we should actually change it. Otherwise, we're just going to have this massive pull quote across the whole side of it. So let's do that. Let's actually create just one media query down here. So I'll say at media only screen, and then we need to give it some size, so min width, and I'll say, let's do 600 pixels like this. And if I come down here, let's go ahead and add a few different things. So the first thing I want to do is change kind of the whole parent container here, the callout class. So right now I have them stacked next to each other. So I'm going to grab that callout class, and I want to change the grid template columns. So I'll say grid template, template columns, and I want to change it just to one fraction, so it goes straight across. Then I want to change grid template rows, and I want to change this to be auto, which tells it layer the stuff up and down. And you see that's what it does as soon as I save. I actually don't want any space between them now, so I'll set the gap to 0. And then let's go ahead and set the width itself, and we're going to use the min property, which is going to say pick the smaller of these two. So I'll say let's say either 40% or 400 pixels. So that's as wide as it will be. And then what I need to do is actually use a classic property here of float left. Now you might remember up top here we have a border. Let's see if we can find that border. Here we go, border left. On the callout content, we're going to eventually get rid of that, but I do want a border on the entire thing on the parent. And I don't want it left, I want it right. And then so it spaces out from the content, I'm going to set a margin right of 1.5 rem. All right, now let's worry about the callout content. And this callout content is all the text, including the by Chris Pennington and the pull quote, all that kind of stuff. First, let's set that border to none to get rid of that weird left-hand border. And then we're going to text align things to the right so that they start over on the right side. Now, once I do that, I actually need to add some padding. So let's say padding right, and we want it to be the same as the margin right up top here so that this space and this space look the same. So I'll set that to the same. And then finally, we're going to do position of relative because when we're on desktop, we want to have a little pull quote symbol there. All right, so let's do that. So I'll say callout content. We're going to have a before pseudo element, and inside here, whenever you have a pseudo element, you have to have some kind of content, even if it's nothing. So I'm going to set that to something though, because we actually want this little smart quote. And now that I have position relative on its parent, I can set position absolute here. And then let's set font size here to 3 rem to make it really large. All right, by my eye, the only thing we have left then is our callout, let's see, what was that? Icon container. Now, we actually want this to be below everything, and this is a flex child here. And so what we can do is just change the order to 1. Anything greater than 0 is going to actually define an order. And so I'm just saying, hey, make this the next thing after whatever the defaults are. So it moves it below everything else. Let's change the flex direction back to row. And then I want the child itself to justify content to end. And it should pop it over that way. And then I need to add the same. Let's add a margin here. Margin of 0, 1.5. That gives me the same spacing as up above. And then let's do 0.5 down below and then 0. Okay, that's all we're actually going to do. So let me pull this down just so you can kind of see what's going on. And I'll walk you through this one more time. Let's go ahead and add an extra quote. Let's grab this here. Let's go down here. Let's see, article, subheading. Sure, how about here? We're going to say like, this is a computer I am typing on. Something stupid, all right? And then let's not have an author just so we can see what that looks like. And if I come down here, it's saying by. That's because we added that here. So maybe that's one of those things you'd want to change around on your own. So maybe let's add an author just so it doesn't look dumb. Let's say Steve Jobs said this by Steve Jobs. All right, if we click this, it should actually open up that tweet. And the other one should work as well. I think WhatsApp actually opens and just says, here's what I would say, but you have to actually log in to use it. And Facebook, because we're developing locally, doesn't even let us do anything. If we click here, it just says log in. And if you do, it says you have to have a real href to share. All right, so that works wherever you're at. And again, we've got it both working on desktop and on mobile, along with these cool little animations. And all this is possible with a single JavaScript module that we've just added right here with not that much text. Hopefully that was helpful for you in just thinking how to template things. And you can add whatever you want in here. And those data attributes as well, you can have them whatever you want. So you could have like a one that says right side or left side and decide which side you put it on based off of that. And as you can see, just really easy to template stuff out with just vanilla JavaScript. Well, I hope this was helpful too. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Happy coding.